Archaeologists have discovered a huge ancient city hidden underground in Mexico, which may give a better understanding of the Maya civilization.
For centuries, the fall of the Maya has remained one of history's greatest enigmas. But modern genetic analysis has finally broken the silence. The results reveal an origin story so unsettling, it forces us to reconsider the entire civilization. In an untouched chamber, scientists found human remains, though human may not be the right word.
They die and they revive again every day to remind humans that they got to keep the balance, maybe by making offerings and rituals specific to the underworld.
Within their genetic profile, researchers found an anomaly, a pattern that contradicts established human lineage. What followed wasn't celebration, but concern. Because this wasn't just a discovery. It was evidence of a hidden connection the Maya were never meant to reveal. The obsidian anomaly. It all started in the Petén Basin of northern Guatemala. This is one of the thickest, least explored parts of the entire Mayan world. A research team was working on a restoration program, scanning the foundations of collapsed temples near the massive city of El Mirador. The ground-penetrating radar showed an anomaly, a geometric void, perfectly circular, buried more than 40 feet below the pyramid's foundation. You see, nature doesn't build in perfect circles. At first, they thought it was just a natural cave. But as they dug, they hit a layer of stone that was wrong. The blocks were smoother, cut with perfect precision, and bound together by a strange adhesive compound that was harder than modern cement. Then they found it. A sealed doorway. A single massive slab of limestone. It had faint engravings, but they weren't Mayan. They didn't match any known script. Some looked like pre-Olmec shapes, while others seemed entirely alien. The team noted their instruments were acting up again. The slab was giving off weirdly low magnetic readings, as if it had metal inside the stone. After days of careful work, they finally breached the slab. A burst of compressed air hissed out. Inside was a circular chamber about 23 feet across, but the walls were coated in a black, glass-like substance. It looked like obsidian, but it absorbed the light from their lamps. It didn't reflect it. The air was cold, several degrees lower than the jungle outside, and it was completely unnaturally silent. And in the center, sitting on 3 stone pedestals, were the ancient remains of 3 individuals. They were seated cross-legged, surrounded by jade ornaments, polished metallic discs, and crystal fragments. What many overlooked at first was the state of preservation. The site was pristine, untouched by decay, which should be impossible in the tropical humidity. But the individuals themselves were the real mystery. Their skulls were elongated. Now, we know the Maya practiced artificial head binding, but this was different. The bone density and symmetry suggested this wasn't artificial. This was genetic. But here's the kicker, the carbon dating. The team tested organic fibers from the chamber. The results came back at approximately 12,400 years before present. Let that sink in. This chamber and the people inside it were thousands of years older than the Maya civilization. They were older than the Olmec. They were from a time before history as we know it began in the Americas. This discovery alone would change the textbooks. But the thing nobody tells you is what happened when they took the remains back to the lab. They conducted a DNA test. And what they discovered, what they uncovered, is the dark secret this story's title is truly about. The early analysis was routine. The mitochondrial DNA traced to haplogroup A2, commonly found among indigenous peoples of the Americas. But then, the deeper sequencing collapsed. Certain sections of the genome simply refused to match any known human data. they suspected contamination, yet the anomaly appeared again. It was identical in all three individuals. They located it in the non-coding regions of the genome, the area scientists once dismissed as junk DNA. They discovered a sequence, a repeating patterned motif. It was so exact it couldn't be random. It wasn't mutation. It was mathematical. When charted, the pattern revealed a recurring ratio that closely mirrored the Fibonacci progression. It was a code. This was impossible. This was a message hidden inside a strand of DNA from 12,400 years ago. They named the anomaly Sequence X473. It was partly human, partly something unknown. But this genetic code wasn't merely a stray message. It matched something else. Sequence X473. This is where the story becomes deeply unsettling. This wasn't just ancient DNA. It was active. Independent tests at another university confirmed these unusual DNA strands. Sequence X473 produced faint biophotonic activity. When exposed to ultraviolet light, they glowed. The wavelength matched that of certain bioluminescent marine creatures. Why? Why would human remains from a jungle chamber emit light? The team compared the sequence against every global genetic database. There was no match, not to any species, ancient or modern. It was a hybrid. It appeared, in every sense, synthetic. And then they found the link. Researchers back at the dig site were enhancing images of the glyphs carved on the chamber door's exterior, the spiral shapes, the star-like designs. They sent those patterns to the genetics lab. The lab team was stunned. The micro-patterns in the DNA, the geometric arrangements of the base pairs, perfectly mirrored the spiral glyphs carved into the stone door. This was no coincidence. This was design. The builders of this chamber 12,000 years ago somehow grasped genetic engineering. They had encoded their sacred symbols into the very biology of those inside. This is where a senior geneticist suggested a hypothesis so extreme it was immediately classified. The sequence wasn't biology at all. It was data storage. The DNA functioned as a biological hard drive. The theory proposed that this junk DNA carried non-biological information. When researchers translated the anomalous segments into binary code, the data produced repeating numerical constants. These constants aligned with precise astronomical ratios, specifically the orbital period of Venus relative to Earth. This chamber wasn't a tomb. It was an archive. And the people inside weren't merely people. They were the books. They were living libraries holding the universe's astronomical secrets within their genes. The isotopic signature of calcium in their bones was also abnormal. It suggested they lived in an atmosphere with slightly higher oxygen levels, conditions unseen in that region for over 10,000 years. So who were these people? An unknown branch of humanity? A lost pre-Mayan lineage? The truth, it turns out, is far stranger. This genetic ghost, this sequence X473, didn't belong only to 3 individuals who died 12,000 years ago. The geneticists ran one final test, a long shot. They compared the sequence to modern populations, and they found a match. The sequence hadn't vanished. It was only dormant, and it's still here, walking among us. Guardians of the old blood. The database flickered to life with a low-frequency match. It traced back to samples gathered decades earlier for completely unrelated studies. Those samples came from a small cluster of isolated highland communities in the Yucatan Peninsula. This was the modern link, the bridge between an impossible past and the living present. Teams were quickly dispatched to these highland villages. These communities exist in harsh terrain, far from major cities. They preserve ancient customs and oral traditions that have endured for centuries. The new DNA testing confirmed it. Faint, degraded traces of sequence X473 remained in a small percentage of individuals. The implications were staggering. Medically, the sequence appeared to subtly influence cellular behavior. In laboratory conditions, cells carrying X473 showed faster tissue regeneration and unusually elevated memory-related neural activity. For generations, these people had displayed an unexplained resistance to certain infections. But the cultural connection was the true shock. Anthropologists speaking with village elders heard unsettling phrases. The elders described themselves as guardians of the old blood. Their oral histories, passed down through hundreds of generations, warned against marrying outsiders, not out of prejudice, but, as they explained, to avoid a loss of balance. They were unknowingly preserving a genetic difference. They were safeguarding the sequence. When researchers showed the elders enhanced images of the spiral glyphs from the 12,000-year-old chamber, several recognized them instantly. They called it the breath of the sky. This wasn't just legend. It was a genetic memory carried forward from a time before the Maya. Yet the mystery of this DNA's origin only deepened. Broader analysis revealed microfragments scattered everywhere. Tiny traces among South Pacific Islanders, northern Andean populations, and even certain Arctic groups. The sequence shared no common ancestor. Phylogenetic models couldn't trace its beginning. It didn't evolve. It simply appeared. It looked unmistakably like an insert, a deliberate addition, a piece of code sporadically placed into human populations across the globe, separated by vast distances and deep time. The picture was sharpening. The DNA, the ancient individuals, the living descendants, all belonged to a single enormous system. But what was the other half of that system? The DNA was the software. Where was the hardware? The answer, it turned out, lay buried just miles away, and it was still active, a pulse rising from below. While geneticists chased echoes in the blood, remote sensing teams uncovered something else, a second anomaly, far larger. Beneath the jungle canopy, concealed under layers of ancient ash and limestone, lay a perfectly symmetrical ring. It was enormous, measuring roughly 300 feet across. This was no sinkhole. This was a structure. Core samples were taken. What they revealed should not exist. The ring was composed of alloy materials, including titanium, vanadium, and iridium. These metals require extreme temperatures to process. The surrounding volcanic glass was fused with metallic fragments, clear evidence of exposure to temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius. No pre-industrial society could achieve this. This wasn't a temple. This was advanced technology. But here's the twist. The structure was humming. Magnetometric scans showed the ring was releasing low-frequency electromagnetic pulses. They were weak, yet consistent, a steady signal repeating every 11 minutes like clockwork. The team was stunned. What was this device? An astronomical tool? A power generator? Early readings suggested it didn't stop at the surface. It extended downward, far deeper than their instruments could reach. This wasn't just a machine, it was a beacon. They chose to analyze the pulse pattern. When they converted the electromagnetic frequency into a numerical ratio, they nearly collapsed. The pulse emitted by the 300-foot metallic ring exactly matched the mathematical ratio found in sequence X473. The machine and the DNA were linked. Let that sink in. A buried, impossible piece of technology was actively interacting with a rare genetic sequence found only in the local guardians of the old blood. They were two halves of the same system, vibrating at the same frequency. The structure was, quite literally, communicating with the DNA. This was the moment theories shifted from lost civilization to something far stranger. What if the machine wasn't communicating with the DNA, but energizing it? Or what if the people themselves were the power source, a living biological battery network built to keep this ancient device in standby mode? Or perhaps the most disturbing idea of all, what if the ring wasn't sending a message, but an instruction, a command encoded in electromagnetism, telling that unique DNA to act, to change, to awaken? That's when they returned to the other artifacts from the first chamber, especially a broken jade tablet. Its glyphs were finally decoded. It was a star map, but not of the present sky. It showed the heavens exactly as they appeared 12,000 years ago. That date alone should chill you. 12,000 years. The precise window of the Younger Dryas, when a global catastrophe, possibly a comet strike, possibly a solar event, reset civilization and plunged Earth into a final, brutal ice age. The map highlighted the Pleiades, a star cluster deeply revered by the Maya. That part wasn't surprising, but it also pointed to a second location. A spiral route connected our solar system to a dense cloud of interstellar dust within the Taurus constellation, roughly 1,500 light-years away. The tablet named this place Cheyenne Hall, the Sky River. The team realized Cheyenne Hall wasn't a destination. It was a passage, a cosmic highway, a stable wormhole. The tablet referenced this location alongside symbols meaning arrival, knowledge, and blood. Its text spoke of the Bakab Chan, those who arrived in light, the Sky People. Now connect the dots. The Sky People arrived 12,000 years ago as the world was collapsing. They didn't come from Taurus, but through it, traveling the Sky River. They encountered a planet on the edge of extinction. They couldn't save the world, but perhaps they could preserve a part of it. What if they weren't just teachers? What if they were genetic engineers? They intervened. They constructed this enormous 300-foot machine, this beacon, this genetic trigger, and sealed it underground. Then they altered the DNA of the survivors. They implanted sequence X473, a genetic marker, a biological alarm clock. They established a bloodline to serve as living guardians for technology they could not retrieve. A system left dormant, quietly humming for 12,000 years. Waiting. Waiting for what? Their return, or the moment when the descendants of those survivors became advanced enough to uncover the machine and finally understand the message. So what happens when that ancient sequence fully awakens? And are the Sky People who built it truly gone? Or are they coming back? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more hidden truths from the past.